Hi everybody, this is Peter. I'm trying a little experiment to see whether I can record something on my computer to clarify some things from class and let you go over it more slowly. So I'm sitting here in Eclipse. By the way, I haven't rehearsed this, so expect some choppiness and confusion. I'm sitting here in Eclipse, and I've created a class called Exception Demo, which is going to be a standard public static main class like you've seen before. But now you know a little bit more about classes, you might be starting to suspect what's actually going on here. Basically, I'm going to try to illustrate three things: the call stack, exception handling, and a little bit more about printf. Okay? So in turn, so basically what I have here, 6 methods. I've defined a couple of short little methods to save me typing. This is a handy technique that you can just learn. Instead of typing a whole string every time, I'm going to type a method, call a method called entering, and I'm going to give it one parameter, which is a name, and it's going to just print out entering and then the name of the whatever parameter I sent. Same thing for leaving. And that's going to help me figure out what's going on in the stack. Now let's go through the whole program. It's quite trivial. Basically, what I do is I call the entering method so that I get some output showing that I entered the main method. Then I call a method called compute salaries, and when it's done, I call a method called leaving main. Okay? So what does compute salaries do? Compute salaries does very little. It types entering compute salaries, then there'll be some other code, because this is a big payroll system that I'm giving you an example of. Then I'm going to call a method called compute hourly, and then some more random code, and then I'm going to say, okay, this method is done, compute salaries is leaving. Next I'm going to call compute hourly, which is called in the middle of compute salaries, where I'm going to type a trace output again here, compute hourly, and I'm going to set up some variables. This is obviously totally fake. A variable called hours worked, a variable called int weekly payment, but I'm going to put hours worked equal to 20, and then I'm going to do system.out.printf, and the format string is this. So we know the output is going to say payment per hour, comma, and then a decimal number. What's the decimal number that's going to stick in here after the comma space? It's going to be the result of the method called payment per hour, weekly payment, hours worked. So those two are the two actual parameters for the payment per hour method. The payment per hour method is very simple. It actually returns a double. That's why I can call payment per hour over here and have it be converted to a string. It takes two parameters. First thing it does is it says I'm entering payment per hour. Then it computes payment as being weekly, which is the first formal parameter, divided by hours, which is the second formal parameter. And then I print out leaving payment per hour, and then I return payment, which in turn will, of course, give me the value of the division here. So it'll print out the string, and then it'll say I'm leaving compute hourly. So compute hourly will continue here. It'll say I'm leaving compute salaries. Compute salaries will leave here. It'll say I'm leaving compute main. So I'm going to type run, and we see that we have an error. Let's have a look at what it is. So it turns out that %d is not a valid conversion to be used with a double. That's very good to know. So that's an exception. It's not one I expected, but it illustrates the point. So let's go fix that by going back to my browser where I just looked this up and find that what I want to do is %f, because it seems like %d is a decimal integer, and what I really want is %f, which is a float. So let's just make that change here. There's %d. I'm going to make it into %f. Save it, run it again. This time I do not get an error. What I get is that I entered the main method, which called compute salaries, which entered. So I'm now over here, which in turn called compute hourly, which is here, which then in turn called hours payment per hour, which is here, which printed out, which returned a value, which was 6.0, obviously 120 divided by 20. And then it printed leaving hourly. Now, why does it say entering and leaving? Because I'm calling the method leaving, and leaving just takes the string leaving, concatenates with the name, and prints it out. Why is this a run-on sentence? Because I did not indicate that I want to start a new line. The way you indicate to start a new line is you do this. Now, if I run it, I see what we call the call stack. Main calls compute salaries, calls compute hourly, calls payment per hour, which returns, then prints out payment per hour, which is this line here in hourly, and everything returns in time. So enter, 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 leave, leave, leave. Okay? So we saw the call stack here. This is essentially conceptually the call stack, although I'm displaying it. We saw %f, and we saw how to define some handy little helper functions here to make it easier for me to print out my trace. Now, let's do something funny. Let's change this hours worked to 0. Instead of working 20 hours, I'm working 0 hours. What do you think might happen now? Well, divide by 0 is not valid now, is it? So if I hit this, I'm going to get that I entered main, I entered compute salaries, I entered compute hourly, I entered payment per hour, and then I failed. I have an exception that was thrown. The exception is called arithmetic exception. And you see here my call stack, because if you look closely, remember I told you guys to look closely, you see that the exception happened at exception demo line 35, which I'm going to bet is this line, even though the line numbers are not on. So let's turn on the line numbers. Go to preferences, type in here line numbers, and it's probably here. Display line numbers, here we go. Okay, and okay. So now we see that the error happened at line 35. Of course, that's where the division happened. But in turn, that 35 was triggered by a call on line 27, which is here. That makes sense. The error on line 27 was triggered by a call that happened on line 15. That's here. And the exception on line 15 was triggered by a call on line 7, which is there. Okay, I'll leave it here. Now, all I've shown you here is an exception that was not handled. So it was thrown as a result of the divide by 0 down here. And because nobody said what to do about it, it went all the way to the top and just printed out an error message. That's all for today. Let me know how you like it.